That's often another myth is that once you're out of the stressful situation or the traumatic situation, that all the stuff goes away. And it doesn't, right? The body stores that, which is why it's so important to be processing it in the moment as much as you can so you're not storing it.
Hey everybody, welcome to Help Is On The Way, a companion podcast to the documentary film The Call. And I'm Charlie English, your host, and I've got a very special guest with me today, a good friend and a colleague who was a part of the film. We interviewed her, and she's a wonderful human being, and her name is Heather Rist, and she gave us some time today. Heather, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you taking some time.
Yeah, thanks so much, Charlie, for having me. I'm honored to be here.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time. And so talk to us a little bit about what your background is and what that looks like. What's your education background and what are you doing now?
So I have a master's degree in counseling, and I'm currently studying for my doctorate in behavioral health. I have hours and hours of postgraduate training in trauma and trauma-informed care. So really, I like to say my expertise is in those areas, in the treatment of trauma and creating trauma-informed environments of care. I am trained in a modality called EMDR. It stands for eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. That is known as kind of the it's in the A category for the treatment of trauma, along with a few other modalities. And recent advances in neuroscience have really given us a lot of insight into how trauma impacts us and the body. And so that's another area that I study quite extensively.
Excellent. Yeah, I did some after, I know I talked to Chief about this on the podcast, but I did some EMDR after our big car accident coming back from Sedona. And it was very helpful to me. And so it sounds odd. It may even look a little odd when you're doing it, but it really helped me out. So that's great. So talking about trauma, and since you have such a specialty in trauma, talk to us about what that is. What does trauma look like, and how does that affect the body? Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so trauma and stress are kind of related, right? They exist on the same spectrum, if you will. Lots of people have heard of fight and flight, which is our stress response. Trauma really kicks in once we overwhelm that stress response and we go into more freeze. So trauma is an extreme end of that stress response. The stress response does not live, it's not controlled by, if you will, our frontal lobe, right? We like to think of our thinking brain as really what makes us human, and what gives us the ability to, build buildings and fly to space, the part of us that we're most proud of. Stress and trauma lives, though, more in our autonomic nervous system. It's an automatic response, so you can't stop it, right? You can't think your way out of this. You can't tell your body not to do it. And so it really does live in your body, in the part of the brain that controls these automatic responses, which is why it requires different training than what people typically get in most graduate school counseling courses, or even psychology counseling courses, because they're really focused on helping that prefrontal cortex and not looking as much in kind of your autonomic nervous system, which is where that trauma and stress response lives.
Yeah, that's interesting, and it's interesting you talk about that the training is different. So is that coursework? Is that you're doing to learn more about how the brain and how the body deals and works with trauma, and like you say in the film, which it really opened my eyes. You call it less of an illness and an injury. You call it an injury. So that was just more coursework kind of a thing. You just decided to specialize in that, and that's where you got that training.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of continuing education kinds of courses that all professionals have to take, right? I really feel like graduate school set us up. It's like the foundation to continue learning, and so I've really kind of curated the CEUs that I've taken after my degree in more trauma and neuroscience. And there's some great researchers out there really studying this, writing books about it, doing research on it, and cultivating courses for people like me who can implement these kinds of modalities and this kind of education into the therapeutic process. So yeah, there's lots of resources.
Yeah, thanks for that, Heather. So one of the things in the film we address is more, not just dealing with the trauma, not just talking about the suicide ideation and the depression and all these things, which is important to talk about and just to discuss, but also the hope side of it. And one of the things that people like Robert Arrieta, Yoga for First Responders, one of the things that I had they didn't make it into the film, but I had a really great conversation with Eric from that team over in Albuquerque, and we sat down and just drank coffee and talked for like 2 hours. And one of the things they talk a lot about is resiliency, and I call it your force field. If force field just gets hit and hit and hit, you don't have time to recover and recoup. That's when you can maybe get that injury or that trauma. Maybe something affects you the way maybe normally you wouldn't be able to. So is that something too when you work with somebody who's dealing with trauma, whether that's a first responder or anybody else who's gone through something? Is that something you start to like talk about and discuss, is a little bit resiliency of like building back that force field?
Yeah, absolutely. We are all inundated with those little pings to our force field every day, right? We live in a very stressful world, a very stressful existence. I personally don't think that this is how we were intended to live in this much stress, but we do, right? You wake up in the morning, your alarm clock's going off, stress. You get cut off in traffic, stress. You hit a red light, you're running late, stress, right? There's just constant little pings to that force field. So as we're going throughout our day, we have to be managing that stress, and our body is actually doing it kind of unconsciously behind the scenes, if you will. Just like when you're working on a computer, you have the operating system is managing all the processing and memory and all of that stuff behind the scenes. Our brain is doing the same thing with our stress. And so when that starts to get overwhelm our body's ability to manage that is when we start to really see more detrimental symptoms, if you will, where we might start to dissociate more. We might start to drink more, right? We might start to do some of these things that really are kind of these unconscious or semi-conscious attempts to manage that stress. So part of cultivating resiliency is working with the body's ability to what we call regulate, right? That stress is constant, kind of a low-grade fight or flight that's on all the time. And first responders, not only are they managing that alarm system, right? The alarm goes off, boom, they got a call to jump to, and they're seeing horrific things, and they're, managing the emotion of all of that as well. Then they have the kind of leftovers of that in their bodies, right? That they have to process. And I think a lot of times, we tell ourselves, well, it wasn't me, so I'm fine, right? It wasn't, for first responders especially, it wasn't me, so I'm fine. And then they, historically have just kind of locked all that stuff away or tried to minimize it or ignore it. And then it builds, and that's when you get those more extreme symptoms like suicidality, and substance use, and maybe even just anger, right? Having a hard time kind of controlling some of that. So yeah, part of cultivating resiliency is really about looking at how is your body responding day to day. A big piece of that is being able to kind of look inside and notice what's going on, not avoiding it, not ignoring it. So you can tend to that regulation. You can discharge that fight or flight by exercising or talking about it, or doing yoga or deep breathing, or those practices that are great to kind of help get your body back into a state of calm, rest and digest, we call it, where then you can, have a more meaningful life and a fuller life, because now you have access to the whole spectrum of human emotion when you're not stuffing and isolating some of these things, which really limits your capacity to experience. So that's a huge part of resilience is being able to process that stress. And that's not like, hey, have a spa day on a Saturday, right? Or get your nails done. I mean, that's a minute to minute sometimes thing, right? It's during your day. It's a way of living. Resilience is a way of living. It's not a vacation. And so I think that's why some of these programs that you've brought up in the call are so important, that it introduces this idea that we are human beings. We have these experiences. Our bodies are responding. It's natural. It's normal. It's not something wrong with you. It's what your body's doing, what it was designed to do in the context of life-threatening experiences or even just a red light. And so how do you work with that so that you can continue to enjoy your existence?
Yeah, speaking of spa days, we did a Ayurvedic retreat when we were in Austria, like about a week ago, and so that was good. I did yoga for the first time in a while, and I'm going to put it back into my routine. So it was really nice, and it was calming, and it was really good. That's super interesting. And one of the things that we talked about in the film too, I guess what Robert kind of did. I think one of the things that's really good, one of the things that Robert's spearheading along with Chief and other ways, Chief Paul Beers, is they're talking to people young. They're talking to the EMS core. So they're trying to plant these seeds. They're trying to say it's okay. It's okay to talk if you had a bad call. It's okay to talk if you had a bad day, or whatever might happen, so that hopefully that resilience can stay stronger throughout their career. Because you don't that these guys didn't, like you said, it was Laura in the film, she says, suck it up, buttercup. That was kind of the mentality for a long time. And so now, but I think that's fantastic. So what is that kind of, just kind of throwing this at you without, but what does that mean, having that early training as a young cadet, or even somebody just coming into a department, or anything like that? What does that mean, having that base level of training, or at least that something?
Yeah, no, that's huge, because now they're starting off their career that way, right? They're not accumulating these faulty beliefs and then having to like undo them and then figure out how to take care of themselves and build resilience. It's like from the get-go. And some of the best ways that we get to manage our own stress and trauma responses are, exercise, by kind of helping to spend some of that fight or flight energy. Social connection, human connection, that is so important to us. We are social creatures. And so this idea that you have to suck it up, buttercup, which is really about isolation, right? It's really about not talking about these things. And then when you're experiencing these things and you're not talking about it, you start to think you're the only one. Then you start to think you're a big weirdo, right? And what's wrong with me? And all those other thoughts that go along with that. So breaking that stigma from the get-go is huge, I think, for really just setting many of these career paths that are inundated with stress and trauma, like first responders, down a completely different trajectory. And ultimately, I think more longevity, right? Those individuals are going to be more sustainable in their field because they have a whole different way of approaching it. So that connection piece is huge, and learning how to talk about it, and that you're not a big weirdo. Other people will be like, oh my gosh, me too. Thank you for saying something,
Yeah. That's it's good. It's kind of I knew it was kind of a softball question there, but I mean, it's still, it's important to talk about. And I think the idea that, I think anybody, especially when you're younger, you kind of feel invincible, man. I remember being 20, 21, it wasn't thinking 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road. And then, these guys now are coming out, and they're, one of the things that Chief Perez in the film talks about is just, the suicide rate for retired firefighters goes way up, because now you don't have that connection, you don't have that bond. They have groups that get together a couple times a week and stuff like that, but it's not the same. You're not on calls every day, living that life. So that that was interesting.
Let me just touch on that too for a moment.
Absolutely.
I just want to say something, like, That's often another myth is that once you're out of the stressful situation or the traumatic situation, that all the stuff goes away. And it doesn't, right? The body stores that, which is why it's so important to be processing it in the moment as much as you can, so you're not storing it. Your body will store it up, what we avoid, it doesn't go away. It just stays in that emotional closet and in that, in your body. And a lot of times, actually, what happens is chronic health conditions, right? Things like high blood pressure and heart disease and even diabetes and, some of the top leading causes of death have a direct correlation to stress and trauma. And so it takes a toll. You can't have your nervous system, which is the control center of your entire being, dysregulated from these experiences and then expect to be healthy or expect to have healthy relationships. And so, yeah, it doesn't go away. So when you retire, it makes total sense because one, you're out of it. You're not getting that, your body is not responding to something that's in the moment anymore. And so then you feel it more, right? Your life around you is calm, and now you feel kind of how, for lack of a better word, this is a really clinical term, how jacked up you are, right? Like all that stuff inside that's kind of dysregulated in there. It doesn't make sense. You're like, why do I feel this way? I'm just at home hanging out with my kids, and now it's there. And so, yeah, that, which is why I think a lot of times people who haven't had that education, especially from early on, are like, there must be something wrong with me. And it makes it really hard to know how to endure and know how to reach out to get the help that you need, especially if you've been inundated with that suck it up buttercup mentality. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that's a great time to transition into the idea, because you're still practicing therapist, right? Clinician?
Yes.
You're still working?
Yes.
Okay. I know there's a lot of services for departments. I know in Albuquerque and Rio Rancho and Bernalillo County, they had resources for therapists. And I can't speak to this. I'm sure there's hesitancy to reach out through your department. I know there's fear of, from what I've heard, there's fear that you could, if you go to want to talk to a therapist for whatever reason as a first responder, maybe your assignment changes or maybe whatever, like there's fear that there could be repercussions for that. So if somebody were willing, wanting to find a therapist, this could be for anybody, but maybe let's focus on first responders at first and just say, what would you recommend they do if they want to kind of quietly try to, say, hey, I'm struggling with something and I want to talk to somebody because I want to try to handle this without going through the department?
Yeah, so in the States, there are a couple of ways that you could find a therapist. A really common one is psychologytoday.com. And what you're going to want to look for are certain, a lot of times therapists will list what trainings they have and kind of their specialties. And so you're going to want to look for some things specifically about being trained for trauma. You're going to want to look for some of those evidence-based trauma treatments. So EMDR, somatic experiencing, internal family system, sensory motor therapy, things like that. You're also going to find people who will say that they are trauma informed, but they primarily use a cognitive behavioral therapy modality. Now, let me tell you why I have beef with this. The research
I'm sorry, real quickly, just for us lay people, what cognitive
Yes.
therapy? So can you kind of describe what that means?
Sure. So cognitive behavioral therapy is one of the most researched therapies in the world. And it's really easy to research because it's really easily manualized. Therapy is part evidence, part art, right? You have to be able to really cultivate connection with people, and you have to be able to kind of have some insight into what they're going through, so you know how to guide them, right? The therapists are not magicians, but there is some definite skill and insight that goes into that. So cognitive behavioral therapy, remember I was saying, we have our big frontal lobes up here, which is where
Yeah.
cognition lives. When we're dealing with stress and trauma, what actually happens is your kind of bottom two areas of your brain, so your autonomic nervous system down here in your brainstem, and then your middle, right, the middle layer, which is your limbic system, memory and emotion, those actually hijack your prefrontal cortex. So I think of it like a dimmer switch, right? You're not like offline, right? Not thinking at all, but it's really dimmed down. And you're actually operating more from your limbic system and your autonomic nervous system. So talking, right? Trying to like thought and reason your way out of these body experiences is like speaking two different languages. So you're going to somebody, and a lot of patients actually who go to somebody who primarily does cognitive behavioral therapy and they're trying to treat trauma will say they feel very gaslit, right? They feel very much like, hey, you just need to think about that differently, or let's process that differently, or what's the facts, or whatever. And trauma doesn't make sense, right? It's not logical. It's a body response. And so, yeah, when you're going to try to logic that, it's like speaking Japanese to somebody who speaks English. It's a mishit. So that is something to be mindful of when you're looking for a therapist, is making sure that they actually have some trauma training, that they don't just say they're trauma informed and only do CBT, or a CBT type of therapy. There is a specific training, and I have friends that do this that say it's different and it works, and I am just going to be completely transparent. I am not educated in it. It's called trauma focused CBT. So I have some friends that do say that is helpful. It does address the body more. It does address regulation, like that kind of regulating that stress response better. So trauma focused CBT. Some things that I would also encourage people to do is the vast majority of therapists will do a 15-minute free consultation. So I encourage you to do that. Ask some questions. Ask how have you worked with first responders before? How do you typically work with first responders? And get a feel, right? Therapy is a lot about the fit. You need to feel like you can trust the person, and you need to feel like you can be honest with the person, that what you say to them is really going to stay between the two of you. You also want to feel like, people who are having suicidal ideation are not going to always go out and immediately attempt suicide. So you also want to find somebody who isn't going to overreact when they're having suicidal ideation, that they're going to assess you appropriately, sure, but they're not just going to be like, oh my gosh, I need to hospitalize you right away. Because suicidal ideation is often an attempt to get out of pain, right? The brain really has two functions: keep you alive, keep you out of pain. And when the pain gets too much, the brain's like, how do I get out of this? And so that suicidal ideation often becomes that escape door for getting out of pain. But if we can start to address that pain, that suicidal ideation goes away pretty quickly. So you also I would say, if you're having kind of suicidal ideation, a lot of people are afraid to talk about it because they're scared that somebody's just going to jump to that hospitalization piece, where a lot of times it's more, this is a sign and symptom of the amount of pain they're carrying internally. So yeah, those I think are some of the things that I would encourage. So psychologytoday.com. There's also on the EMDR website, they have a list, a spot where you can find a clinician. And then you can also just kind of Google in your area, right? Trauma clinicians in my area, and look some up that way. So people who aren't listed in Psychology Today often have a website that will come up in that way.
Yeah, because I know, even from personal experience, trying to find a new therapist can be a bit challenging. And, like you said, you want to make sure that you find the right fit, somebody you can work with and want to work with. So,
Absolutely.
So the idea so now let's say you get in there. Heather, are you still there?
Yep, I'm still here.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So now let's say you're in the you're in the session, you're in session 2, you're in session 3, and it's just not, maybe it's not working out. Maybe you're just not getting what you need from the therapist. What do you recommend that you do? How do you handle that? Because that does happen. I've left a therapist or two just because it wasn't that they were bad therapists. They just had, that connection was never made. And, you know, what do you recommend for somebody who might be like, oh, I found somebody, but I'm not vibing on it.
Yeah, totally. And I just want to say you're not going to hurt the therapist's feelings. And if you do, that therapist needs some supervision, right? We're not here to have our egos stroked, right? This is a job and this is what we do. And obviously, you know, therapists are caring individuals, but we are also trained to show up for the other person. That's our job. So that's often the first thing, is people are afraid of hurting their therapist's feelings. You're not going to hurt their feelings, and by all means, if their feelings get hurt, that's probably a lesson they need to learn, right?
Yeah.
First thing I would do is just bring it up, right? And I know that's awkward and uncomfortable, but saying, hey, you know, I feel like we're not on track with some of my goals here. And here's maybe what I'm looking for, or here's what I'm feeling like I'm not getting. And if it feels comfortable, actually, no, it's not going to feel comfortable. None of us are good at that kind of what feels like confrontation. But if it feels like it's doable, I would say bring it up, because maybe then the therapist can shift directions and say, you know, thank you so much for saying that, right? I often am like, thank you so much. I wasn't aware, right? Or I was misreading that. So I appreciate that. It helps me or the therapist attune better to the person's needs. So that would be my first encouragement. Bring it up, have a conversation. If that goes sideways and it still is not going the way that you would like, don't reschedule. You know, then you say, you know what, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to explore some other options. And unfortunately, it's kind of back to stage
breaking
one.
up with the
Yep. Or if you really want to, reschedule and then call and cancel, right? Call and cancel later. That's always the other out, is like, all right, I'm going to reschedule, but then I'm going to cancel that and I'm going to not reschedule. That's totally fine too. Whatever makes it easiest. The most important thing is just that you get in there and get what you need out of it. I will just say, when we're working on trauma stuff, there's kind of 3 phases. So keep this in mind too, for people who are just entering into the therapy session. Phase 1 is always about cultivating some skills and stability. And so it's about hopefully a lot of psychoeducation, teaching people about trauma and their bodies, and teaching people to kind of look inside and see what's going on in them. I often say to people, you know, I don't know the Vulcan mind meld. I can't sync up with you. So I need you to be a good reporter so you can tell me what's going on in your body.
Yeah.
So the first thing I have people do typically is start taking 3 long, slow, deep breaths excessively, right? 3 to 5 times a day, and then tuning in. After you take those long, slow, deep breaths, your head's clear for a second, right? You get about 10 seconds of peace and clarity before it comes back. But in that 10 seconds, I want you to tune in and say, how have I been thinking? Not what, because then you're going to plan your dinner. How have I been thinking? Am I ruminating? Am I self-critical? Am I just like frantic in my head? Am I peaceful? Is it nothingness? Is it just ocean waves, right? What's going on in there? How have I been feeling? Like naming those emotions. We're not taught this. Most of us are like, I feel mad, sad, or bad, right? Like that's about it. So how have I been feeling? I'm agitated, I'm anxious, I'm peaceful, I'm content. And then how's my body? What's going on in my body? Have I not gone to the bathroom in 4 hours? Am I starving? Have I not had
shoulders
all day?
like this? Yeah.
Super tense. Yeah, so that just helps start to tune in. So stage 1 is that's building skills and stability. Phase 2 is really the trauma processing. That's when we start to actually use EMDR or whatever the modality is that you're using. And we do the stability first because I want you to be able to use those skills when we're doing trauma processing. Trauma processing is not fun, right? It's not a good time. but it does help to resolve things. So I want to know that you can take care of yourself when we do that harder stuff. I also want to know that you can leave the hard stuff in my office and you can go to your life and enjoy some things too, that you're not so overwhelmed with the trauma that you just are carrying it with you. And then phase 3 is integration. All right, we never go back to how we were before. We don't never go back in life. So what do I look like now? Who am I now? I've been through this experience. I've integrated it. I've processed it. What are the lessons, the nuggets, the wisdom? How do I carry this forward in my life? And that's phase 3.
And that's one of my favorite moments of the film, is you walking in the field and talking about this, about what does that look like on the other side. Mm-hmm. So yeah, thank you for that. That's I think those are questions that are good questions that people maybe who've never been to therapy or who are in therapy and are like, this, I don't know if this is working for me. There are different therapists who do different things in different ways. So you might take you 2 or 3 times, maybe hopefully not, sooner than that, but stick with it if you really need it, because it's worth the effort in the end. Really, is there anything else you wanna talk about today, or how? I mean, because really, we kind of touched, I think, with what the goal of today's podcast was, to just actually talk about what therapy looks like on more of a broad scale. But is there anything else you'd want to put out there? I mean, that it doesn't have to necessarily be about first responders, but for anybody who might be listening.
I guess the one thing that just kind of popped in my head is that trauma is kind of a buzzword these days, right? And lots of, if you're on social media, you see a lot of like, I'm traumatized by this, or, and I'd just like to say, not everything's trauma, right? Like, there is discomfort. There are things that hurt your feelings, absolutely. It's not all trauma. And I do think that a lot of times we get stuck in saying, oh, well, I'm traumatized by this, so now that's with me forever, and now I have to avoid these situations forever, whatever that may be. And that is not the case, right? Trauma, this is, going back to what you said earlier, kind of the reminder, trauma is not an illness, it's an injury. And so when we learn how to self-regulate and kind of heal our nervous system, we are freed from a lot of these symptoms. It's not permanently freed, right? Sometimes it's poked again. It's like an old wound that can be poked, but to me, healing is, I know how to tend to that wound. So when it's poked, it doesn't hurt as much or as long as it did initially. But not everything is a trauma. Some things are just, it hurts, sure. And also things that are a trauma, we aren't here to avoid those triggers forever. Some triggers are not avoidable. And so we do have to figure out kind of that discernment between what's an actual trauma and what is something that I'm avoiding that's actually shrinking my life because I've decided it's a trauma and I need to avoid it. So we just throw those out there too.
Yeah, no, that's great. And yeah, like you said, the resiliency goes back to the resiliency kind of topic too. That wound is there, but it's, I think Laura Owen, my colleague, she talked about it like being like, or I forget, like a sprained ankle. You can always sprain it again, but you know how to protect it a little bit better, and it's kind of the same thing. So, but and I think one of the things too I want to talk about too is I've got the Schools for Hope jacket on right now with Robert Arietta. If you can see it there, Heather, it's right there.
Yep.
And that is just for anybody who wants to know. If you're a first responder out there, you're welcome to call them 24 hours a day. There are first responders on call that will talk to you confidentially. If you're struggling with something or you need information, they'll try to help you find a therapist. Whatever, if you just want to talk and vent, there's somebody there to listen to you. So maybe if that's all you needed at that time, but if you just need to vent, it's a growing number of programs and training and other things that are going on that are really trying to help these communities just build that resiliency so that they can be there for you when you need them to be, whether that's an EMT or that's a firefighter or a sheriff or whoever that might be, a first responder, that they can be their best on that call for you. So really that's kind of the goals, that, and that's really what I liked about, like, the best thing about the film for me was just that I had no idea walking into this what it meant, what this community was being built, and a lot of it is being built organically. I mean, I don't want to, like, the departments are doing a lot of great, amazing things too. So I don't want to sit there and say every department's built differently. They've got chaplains, they've got other things that they do, but not. It's kind of, it feels like there's not just like a standard and they all do it. So they all do it, build it their own way. So yeah, reach out to your department if you feel comfortable. But there's other resources out there, like Schools for Hope. Yellow Rose campaign, all these other things that we talk about, yoga for first responders, that are going out there to just try to help people. The last episode, I was talking to Chief Bierce and Lieutenant Mike Myers from Albuquerque Fire Rescue, and they did a retreat. It was like a 3-day retreat, and they did cold plunges every day. They did yoga. They did resiliency training. They talked. They did hikes. It looked amazing. And so take advantage of those things. That's what I'd say as a layperson. I am not a therapist and I have no formal training. I've been married to a therapist for 30 years or 27 years, so I've got some through osmosis, I guess, maybe technically, but
7 years.
I know,
That's amazing.
it's a a long time, isn't it?
That is a long time. And I've,
No,
was
it's
at your wedding, and I've known you that long. Not 27, you got 23.
23, yeah, my bad.
23, there you go.
Sorry, honey.
Yeah.
But okay, Heather, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. Stay warm out there in Washington, and
Thank you.
Thanks
for
doing this.
having me. Yeah.
Of course, I know you're going to Japan, and I know we're fitting it in for the holidays kickoff, and everybody kind of disappears for a little while. But thank you, and have fun in Japan. Safe travels.
Yes,
and
thank
you,
you.
my friend, for joining.
Yes, absolutely. Good to see you.